In this video, we're going to solve this quadratic. Notice that it is not set equal to 0, and therefore we're going to go ahead and have to make that change so that it is set equal to 0 before we use the quadratic formula. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's get it prepared for the quadratic formula. The first thing that I want to do is I notice that since it's not set equal to 0 and it has a 3x on the right hand side, I want to move this 3x over to the left hand side of the quadratic. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is a positive 3x. So to move it to the left, I'm simply going to subtract 3x from it. And that leaves me with 0. Now, I also have to subtract 3x from the left side to keep my equation balanced. Now I'm going to go ahead, and this is positive 2 minus 3. And if I were to put that in my calculator, it's going to be 2 plus negative 3, which leaves me with simply negative x. I'm then going to go ahead and bring down the rest of my values. So this is still x squared. I'm going to bring down my negative 15. And now, since this is set equal to 0, we can go ahead and use the quadratic formula. Now, as we're using this formula, we got to remember a few things. First off, remember that a, right, is going to be your coefficient of x squared. So I'm just going to write an a right there. So ax squared. And then our middle term is b. Now I'm going to go ahead and change that one to black right there, right? Because this is plus bx. And this is going to be plus c, our constant. So because x squared doesn't have a number in front, I know my coefficient for that one is 1. So therefore my a value is going to be 1. My b value, right, this is negative x, so there is an invisible 1 in front of it, is going to be negative 1. And my c value is negative 15. So notice I just circled them to make them easy to find for when we're using the quadratic formula. So I'm going to move this up just a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and write out this quadratic formula to the right first, just to refresh your memory of what it is. And we should have x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Now I'm going to write this again directly underneath my quadratic, where I've pointed out my a, my b, and my c value. But I'm going to go ahead and put parentheses in place of the variables that we're going to be replacing, or we're going to be using substitution to go ahead and solve this. Now I got x is equal to, and I have a negative sign, and then I have b. So for b, I'm going to put parentheses, plus or minus the square root of, and then I'm going to have another b, and it's going to be squared, minus 4 times a times c. So I'll put parentheses for my a value and parentheses for my c value. Now this will all be divided, so I'm going to put a division line, by 2 times the value of a, right, 2a. So 2, and I'm going to put a parenthesis. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start filling in these numbers. So first, right, in that first parenthesis right there, we want to put our b value. And so I have a positive 1. I'm going to rephrase that. I have a negative 1 for my b value. So I'm going to place negative 1 in there. And then for our second b, we're going to take that same negative 1 value and put it in there. And then we're going to replace our a value. And our a value is positive 1. So I'll put a 1 right there in the place of a. And then our c value is negative 15. So we'll put a negative 15 in place of c. Finally, we're going to replace this a variable on the denominator. And so let's go ahead, and our a value is 1, so we're going to put a 1 right there. So notice we have our b value again, our a value, our c value, and our a value. And now we're ready to move to the next step. So I'm going to put x equals, and I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of math here. I'm going to grab my calculator and just show you that this right here is going to have what we call an exact answer. An exact answer means that we're going to actually keep a radical in our answer. And for those of you who kind of struggle with that, I'm going to show you an easy way to be able to make sure that you're able to come up with that. Now, how I know it's an exact answer is because I'm going to put it in my calculator, and you're going to notice I get this really odd decimal strand in my answer. So let me go ahead and take this. The first thing that I want to do is I want to hit my alpha and my y equal button, and then enter, because I want my fraction bar. That makes it a little bit easier to do these types of problems with a quadratic formula. I'm then going to go ahead and put in negative, parenthesis, -1, close parenthesis, and I'm going to do plus. Now notice I'm not putting plus and minus. I'm just doing the plus first. Right, so I'm doing the addition first. I will go back and copy this and then do the subtraction next after I'm done. Now then I'm going to go ahead and hit second x squared to get my radical symbol, and I'm going to put a parenthesis, and I'm going to put -1, close parenthesis, squared, and then -4, and I'll scoot it over here now so we can get this last part, times my a value, so parenthesis 1, times my c value, parenthesis -15, close parenthesis. Now I'm going to go ahead and go down to the denominator, and in the denominator we simply have 2 times 1, so 2 parenthesis 1. Now when you do this and you hit enter, you get this odd decimal strand, right? And when we see a value like this, immediately it's going to be very difficult if you were to enter this into one of these computer generated programs, if your teacher uses it, or your teacher may just tell you they want an exact number, which means that they don't want a decimal from you. Right? They want something that's exact. And so in that case, we're going to need to use a radical. Now the way around this when you run into this is you're going to go ahead and we're going to re-enter everything that we have inside of the radical, but we're not going to put it in a radical. In other words, I'm going to highlight it. I'm just going to take these values that are right here, that I just boxed in with the highlighter, and I'm going to type it into my calculator. So it's like we're doing this in a small steps. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to scoot this over. And I'm going to start with my b value. So I'm going to put parenthesis, -1, close parenthesis, squared. And then after I do that, I'm going to go ahead and put -4 times a and times c. And hit enter. Notice it gives me 61. So notice what we have here is the square root of 61. So that's an exact number, so I'm going to go ahead and write what we have here. And so if I were to write this out, I'm going to draw this. Just this right hand side, I got plus the square root of 61. Now we still have this other stuff. We haven't handled this negative, right? This negative right here times negative b value of 1 and 2 times our a value of 1. So I'm just kind of doing this in little steps just to show you. So all I did was just take what was in the inside of the radical, and I went ahead and let the calculator evaluate it and do the math. It became 61. So I'm going to go ahead and do this next part. Now a negative times a negative makes that a positive. So this actually becomes +1 plus the square root of 61, and then 2 times 1 is just 2 over 2. Now this is my answer. This is my final answer, and I like to put a little plus by here because this is the final answer for when we are adding the radical, right? Because we were doing addition right here. Now if you were to go ahead and you were going to do the subtraction, it would be much the same. So I'm going to put a little minus sign before the x. That lets me know this is the one where we're going to be subtracting it. So it would basically look exactly the same as this one that we have. Nothing would change on the inside here, but what we'd end up with for our second solution would be x is equal to -1 minus the square root of 61 over 2 times 1. And once again, if we did the math on there, we would just end up distributing this. That would give us a +1, and it would be minus the square root of 61. And 2 times 1 just gives us 2. So then here's the two answers. This is one of my roots, or my solutions, and this is the second solution. And it's in an exact answer. In other words, we have a radical in here. We didn't simplify it, so we don't have this odd decimal strand. Now, just like we had noticed before when I used my calculator, we had this odd value here. For instance, we had this 4.4051248838. If I wanted to go ahead and check and see if I did this work right, I could just simply put it back in and just verify that it gives me that value. And I'm going to do that real quick just so you can see. So if I go ahead and I put in 1 plus the square root of 61 over 2 and hit enter, it gives me the same thing, right? So they're equivalent, but this is considered an exact answer where the decimal is not. and many teachers will ask for exact answers. So hopefully this helps you to know what to do when you run into a problem where you don't have an exact answer and the teacher wants it to be that way or be put into that format.